Welcome back, mentors, to the Unintentional Mentor Podcast. I am your host, Michael Doherty. It is very much my pleasure to have you returning for yet another episode. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to episode 6 with Dr. Tony Ortega. This conversation is huge for me. I didn't expect it to go the directions it did. Just giving you a heads up, there is some sensitive conversations around drug use and things of that nature. But as always, this conversations are meant for adults. I mark it so in the podcasts and on YouTube and all that other fun places. So if you're underage and you're coming across this story, there's going to be a lot of questions for your parents. I honestly hope this does inspire some conversations with you, with your friends, with your family. I'm very honored for the things that Tony shared. As always, with my mentors, they get a chance to listen to the episode after we recorded it. So everything you're hearing is fully with the permission of Tony. I'm very, very honored. And the last few minutes of this podcast are probably some of the most meaningful things I have heard that could be given to as advice to anybody. So I hope you enjoy this week's Unintentional Mentor, Dr. Tony Ortega. Hi, Tony.
Hi, what's up? It's so good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
It's been a while. We haven't seen each other in person. It sucks.
I know. We've got to fix that. But today is about you. And part of the reason I wanted to have you as one of my top 10 first unintentional mentors was I have watched you grow from meeting you at a comic book convention and watching you nerd out on all the things that you love to becoming a comic book content creator and helping you with that Instagram Indiegogo campaign and just everything in between, like your books, your social, the work that you do. I don't know a part of your life that has not like inspired me in some form or fashion.
Thank you. And ironically enough, today I received the very last page for issue 5 of my comic book, The Accords.
Awesome.
And it is the last issue of the first story arc, and I could not be prouder of the work that we've done in these 5 issues.
It's amazing. It is honestly amazing. So you know what? That's where we're going to start. As a huge lover of comic books as I am, and one of my unintentional mentors is Stan Lee, also Steve Rogers, fictional and non-fictional, although some might say the Stan Lee that we meet is the fictional version of Stan Lee. Who was a mentor, of unintentional mentor, or even mentor of yours that got you into wanting to make your own comic?
Oh, you threw a curveball. I wasn't prepared for that one. I think back to one of my first comic book storylines I could remember reading, and it was in the Avengers, and it was the Korvac saga, and it was written, I believe it was Steve Englehart, Jim Shooter, and the artist was George Perez, and they weaved this story, all of these characters that were Avengers, that were sort of Avengers, and might be Avengers, into this galaxy-spanning thing. And I'm sitting there being like, this is the best shit ever. And so, ironically enough, when I was coming up with the idea of the Accords, and I wanted to do something big, I just reflected back to the Korvac saga. I reread the Korvac saga in the Avengers, and I was like, yeah, I can do this. I could tell this huge tale involving these 7 strangers and then everybody else that tends to show up. And, 5 issues later, here we are.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So would you say Chris Claremont and the rest were the unintentional mentors for where you are now? Was there any one of them that stood out to you? Because I know when I look at the Accords, Chris Claremont absolutely comes to mind.
I want to say that there's got to be, Chris Claremont definitely, because my fictional unintentional mentor is Jean Grey, the Phoenix. As we all know, everybody who knows me knows I'm obsessed with her. I mean, I'm wearing a Phoenix mala as we speak. I have a Phoenix pendant. I have a Phoenix tattoo. It's like, there's no question what I'm all about, right?
Right.
So certainly Chris Claremont, the tales that man has told, my God. And the Dark Phoenix saga. I mean, that's when I was introduced to the X-Men.
Same.
And I was like, Jean Grey, this is the coolest bitch ever. Bam, she gets killed. I'm like, what? No! She's the coolest character. And for years, I went without until they brought her back in the pages of X Factor. So Chris Claremont, Steve Englehart. More recently, I have to say, Jonathan Hickman and Tom Taylor, who wrote Jean Grey's Return in X-Men Red, because he took Jean Grey from like Cyclops' wife to a power to be fucking reckoned with. And
Yes.
Jean Grey has never been written better than by the hands of Tom Taylor.
I completely agree. And that arc made me believe that Logan was the better suitor for her than Scott Summers could ever be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But that's getting into the nerdery of things. So look, you giving me the perfect dovetail.
Okay. All right.
Jean Grey, Dark Phoenix, is a really great unintentional mentor for a lot of people I know because of the evolution the character went. I mean, we're not going to talk about the movie, but that's fine.
What movie? You mean Last Stand and Dark Phoenix? I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. But you also are an amazing human being for the day job that you have, which is, to me, and I'm going to put this in a very terrible way, and I apologize, but it's a visual thing for me. You help people evolve with their own Phoenix through the work that you do on your daily basis.
I don't think that was terrible. I think that was awesome. That's actually beautiful.
Thank you. I thought that I was going to stumble over that for a second because I was just like,
I'm taking it in and I'm like, oh, yes, that's what I do. That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. So, as a psychologist, as somebody who counsels, what unintentional mentor did you have to help you evolve in that role?
So I'm going to answer that question by saying not a psychologist. Well, actually, no, that's not true. So when I was a wee lad in Miami, Florida, now a little background, my parents came over from Cuba in 1962, right when Castro took power, and there was a huge exodus of Cuban people of all age ranges. And so a friend of my grandmother's, her name was Olympia Bermudez. She was a psychologist in Cuba, but coming here, she couldn't get her degree translated. She couldn't be a psychologist here, so she was mopping floors in Burger King. I shit you not. And I would be like, Olympia, what's a psychologist? And she would tell me what I was like, you got paid to help people feel better? There's a job that exists like that? Like in my mind, I couldn't fathom that, because, God bless him, my dad, one of the hardest working men I ever knew, sold beauty supplies. So making money was, to me as a young kid, was very like almost in this very capitalistic kind of thing. And mind you, no jab towards my dad. My dad was an amazing human being and, intentional, unintentional mentor of sorts. But when Olympia would tell me these stories of what a psychologist did, I was absolutely mesmerized. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
And then what happened?
So then I went to,
because you have a very, very needed and focused niche.
Yes.
And I am intentionally bearing the lead because I want to understand the story of how you got there.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a lot of history in a short period of time. So graduated from high school, did my first year of community college, discovered cocaine, like a lot of people did in Miami, Florida in the 80s. Thank you, Al Pacino. And at that time, I'm like, screw this. I don't need to be a psychologist. But I don't know if you know this about me. I actually owned a comic book store in Miami, Florida.
I did not know that.
No, very few, not a lot of people here that I've met here in the Northeast know this. And it was great because I could show up high to work and it was like, awesome. I didn't care, right? But unfortunately, like with any drug addiction, I basically was burying the store right into the ground. And it wasn't until one evening where I was, let's just say, I don't want to just, I mean, I think the statute of limitation is over, but let's just say I had some legal issues.
Fair enough.
I went to my dad and told him what was going on. He grabbed his tennis racket, beat it over the ledge till he broke it in half. And I'm sitting there going, what the fuck? I thought he was going to hit me with it. And my dad was not a violent man. And he said, all right, this is what we're going to do to get you sober. God, I haven't thought of that story in a long time. And that's when I got really close to my dad, because before that, I wasn't very, very close to him. So I got sober and I joined the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous for many, many years. I think of that time very, very fondly. At the age of 29, it was a Monday morning, and I got a call from, I want to say it was my sister. Hey, you need to come to Dad's. He hasn't been home. So we went over. My grandmother lived in the apartment behind his house, and it was unlike him for not to come home. And around 10:30 in the morning, a cop car pulls up, and I was the first one to greet them. And they're like, I'm sorry to inform you, but we found Juan Ortega's body earlier this morning. And he had died of a heart attack driving home. And it was a secluded road. So, in that part of Miami, it made sense. He crashed into a building lightly and was there until the people that worked in that building showed up. At that moment, after the grieving, many, many months had passed, I knew that I was a homosexual man. But you're talking about the 80s and 90s when AIDS was a, barely treatable thing.
Right.
So I was so scared to be myself. If I'm a gay man, that means I'm going to die. And because the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous and most, if not all 12-step programs are very welcoming of everybody, I met a group of LGBT individuals, and there's this thing every year, first weekend of June, where all the gays around the country descend upon Disney World in Orlando, Florida. So I went with my lesbian girlfriends. To make a really long story short, it was a Saturday night at 8 Tracks. I believe that club is not there anymore. Dancing to, I swear it was unintentional, Dancing Queen by ABBA, when a blonde hair, blue-eyed boy from Tallahassee named Billy came up and kissed me. And I was like, oh, yes, child. This is who I am. And I wanted to seek therapy for this because I knew nothing about being gay. And I didn't find any gay therapists in Miami. And, not to bash on the therapists that I did have, they were lovely, they were great, they were competent, they were professional. There was just a level where I felt like it stopped because they were heterosexual and I'm homosexual. And so fast forward, here I am in New York, working at what I thought was my dream job at a forensic practice, which ended up being a nightmare. This young gay lad calls me and he goes, hey, I'd like to see you for therapy. I'm a gay man, I'm like, I really don't have any openings. Later that day, an opening came up. I'm like, you know what? I called him back. And I was also volunteering at the time at an LGBT organization here in New York called Identity House. I put two and two together and go, Tony Ortega, why don't you open up your own practice and be that therapist that you did not have? And on November 19th, 2014, I opened the doors to my office, and this November will be 7 years. And I don't go to work. I go do something I fucking love.
That's awesome.
Because, I help members, I help trans people get insurance approval for their gender affirming surgeries. I help people come out to their families. I help people live authentic lives. I mean, I help them tap into their phoenix.
I was waiting for it because I was going to say it if you didn't.
Yeah, and who doesn't want to do that every fucking day?
Yeah. I don't know a single person if that was their calling that would not want that.
And I deviated from that calling because when I got sober, I wanted to go back to pursue psychology. I'm like, I'm going to be a substance abuse therapist. And while well-intentioned, and I met some amazing people and learned a lot of amazing things, it really wasn't my calling. And today I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing on this earth.
That's amazing. Now, was there anybody along the way of your journey that you basically told a story of an unintentional mentor teaching you what you don't want to be, which that is absolutely an unintentional mentor. Like I had that growing up. Like I had a father figure who was everything retrospectively that I never want to be as a human being. So that's a really great unintentional mentor for me on how to live my life. But as you said, you kind of blazed your own trail in a career that at the time, I don't know anybody that was doing that in the field that you were doing. So was there anybody that you looked to kind of gain guidance for maintaining 7 years of awesome, amazing, inspiring work?
Gosh, I haven't thought of her in so long. So I finally found through my insurance a lovely, lovely lesbian therapist by the name of Arlene Kochman, who had this cute little office, exposed brick in the West Village. And, typical New York Jewish old lesbian, God bless her. And I would tell her my story. She's like, Tony, you don't have any friends here. I'm like, yeah, no, I have my cousins and I have this. And she goes, they're not your friends. They're their friends. You need your own people. And so she was the one that suggested that I volunteer at Identity House. And I would share with her the stories and I would tell her, do you think I could do my own practice? And she was like, of course you can. I'm like, can I just do gay people? She's like, yeah. I think my insurance changed and she didn't take it anymore. And so I met my first gay male therapist ever, Scott Kramer, who is an amazing human being, openly HIV positive, runs a fee for whatever donation-based HIV support group for gay men every week. And he also kind of held my hand as I did this. And because I had for 5 years, I worked for United Healthcare, I knew the insurance business inside and out. So like I put all of that together to create what I have today and now going to be 7 years. So I guess I have two unintentional mentors in Arlene Kochman and Scott Kramer. Unfortunately, Arlene transitioned, I want to say about 5 years ago. I found out in the weirdest way, but yeah, she passed away several years ago. But thank God for her. But she was my first exposure to a therapist who was openly a homosexual, because therapists are supposed to, old school, be this blank slate.
Right.
And Arlene would tell me about her wife and her ex-husband and the 3 kids and this and da. And I was like, that's the kind of therapist I want to be. I want to be transparent. I want my clients to relate to me. Funny enough, that nightmare job I told you about, one of my coworkers, very old school psychologist, said, oh my God, Tony, do you tell people that your clients that you're gay? And I said, oh my God, Jennifer, do you tell people that you're straight? Because I'm not going to feed that heteronormative dialogue in my workplace. No, it's not going to happen. So anyway, I think I gave you way more information than you.
No, you gave me. Look, this is your story, and I don't get to tell you what is too much or too little, and I'm loving every second of it.
Yeah, you're giving me a walk down memory lane, child.
And somehow that's welcome to Unintentional Podcast. This is your life. So what's interesting is I'm listening to you and I see the thread, and it's constant and it is amazing, from your childhood, Olympia and the therapist that she was, and your dad and how he was for you, to Chris Claremont and that crew creating a character who is, I would dare say, your spirit animal.
Oh, for sure.
To Arlene and Scott, who really mentored you into where you are today. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know a single part of the story that isn't fucking amazing or inspirational. And it's like when you hear the story of somebody who has finally hit the place in life, like I'm not one of those people that believes in the secret or like universe and things like that, but there's absolutely people who are meant to do one thing, and
Mhm.
I firmly believe you are it. Um, but you also do so many different things. You are an author. So that is a very interesting and strange leap from therapist. So how did we get to author?
Um, I asked you before the show, does an unintentional mentor need to be an actual person? Can it be an event or events?
Absolutely.
And so in between 2016 and 2018, a series of events occurred that prompted me to finally say, you know what? I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do because, I'll get into the story. So in 2016, I was in a very vulnerable place in my life. I hadn't been in a relationship for a very long time. And in walks my ex-boyfriend. Little did I know, this man was a textbook narcissist. And because I was in that very vulnerable personal place in my life, I didn't catch the warning signs early enough. Very emotionally abusive relationship for 69 days. I shit you not. I counted when I was writing my first book. In that time, I was very involved with a local metaphysical community. I had heard about Marianne Williamson many, many years ago. Refound her again at a very desperate time in my life, and then introduced to other people. So, I do have very eclectic spiritual beliefs.
Fair.
After Fernando and I broke up, and I was in the shower, and I heard chapter 1, da 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 da, chapter 2, da 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 da. Here's the funny part. I never take my phone into the bathroom because I'm always scared it's going to fall in the toilet. For some bizarre reason, my phone was sitting on the bathroom sink.
Okay.
I turned off the shower and I just started I was like taking dictation. I posted on Facebook, guys, this happened. A girlfriend of mine, Alicia, reached out to me. She goes, you know that I'm a book editor, right? And I'm like, can we talk? And so I started writing. I've always wanted to be a writer, but I just never took the time to do it. And, initially, hashtag is he here yet, being the person you want to be with, was supposed to be a dating guide for gay men.
Okay.
Did not end up being that. It ended up being a guide to being the best version of you to see what shows up in your life romantically then.
I like that better.
Yeah. And so, I've had a lot of straight people. I've even had coupled people read it and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. As process continues, there was a family estate issue where I was betrayed by one family member and a series of related family members, not by blood. And then the very community that was supporting me kind of turned on me or they didn't follow through with what they said that they were going to do. And I felt very betrayed by them. And I'm turning 50 as a single gay man in New York City. I said, you know what? At best I got 50 years left. What the fuck do I want to do for the next 50 years? Because I'm not going to have the health I have now. So at that time, hashtag is he here yet was already self-published. In the eyes of a British publicist who is now my agent, Helen Lewis, in the eyes of HarperCollins, all this shit's happening. And I'm like, oh my God, are you fucking kidding me? How did this happen? I just wanted to write a book. I didn't want all and so that led to me thinking, gosh, comic books and representation. There is not a lot of realistic LGBTQ representation in comic books. Here's the way I see it. and please don't, if anybody hears this and disagrees with me, reach out to me. My word is not law. This is just my experience. So comics, gay characters in a straight team. So you'll have a primarily straight team with like speckles of gay.
Colossus and the X-Men.
Yes, basically. Or if you have an LGBT comic, it's all gay in your face.
Right.
I'm thinking of one example in particular that I'm not going to mention. We have a little feud going on. And so I said, but it's the full spectrum. Why can't it be an equal number representation? And at the same time, for folks who aren't familiar with the chakra systems, and that's it's like the 7 wheels that exist within us that operate in different ways. And I'm like, comic books are very spiritual, but they're not overtly spiritual. How can I merge my desire to have an equally representation LGBTQ ally team that was very spiritual and psychological in nature? So I said, oh, what if each chakra could be a superpower?
Okay.
And so I came up with that. Ironically enough, I don't know if you're familiar with the Marvel Comics artist Luciano Vecchio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He was visiting for New York Comic Con, and we had dinner at a Mexican restaurant. I go, Luch, can I throw this idea off you? He goes, sure. And he goes, I gave him the idea. He goes, Tony, this needs to be a comic book. So then I reached out to Rich Bernatovich, who created the Sentinels that I had just finished reading. I'm like, and he's such a great friend. I said, Rich, I really need your help. He goes, here's the script I used for Sentinels. Okay, I've written a book. Now I know what it's like to write a script for a comic book. All I need is an artist. And so through the person we met through, which is Mark Dominic, my best friend, he hooked me up with this artist in Spain named Alex Garcia. Here's the thing. All of these things kind of, if they're meant for you, they just kind of line up for you, I think, sometimes. And so Alex did the preliminary character concepts. And I was like internally, please stay on, please stay on, please stay on, please stay on. He goes, Tony, by the way, do you want me to stay on as the regular artist? I was like, yes. And, I decided to kickstart, which thank you so much for all the help. I
always
was having a nervous breakdown the entire 30 days, let me tell you.
Look, crowdfunding, and I will tell this to everybody who listens. By the way, episode 3 was John Trigonis, who used to work at Indiegogo. He and I met because of crowdfunding, and he shares, we share the same philosophy, but different approach. He is very zen, and I'm a big sledgehammer when it comes to just dealing with things.
I can do both.
Crowdfunding is an emotional roller coaster that is 90% adrenaline, 5% logic, and 5% just hold on to your seat and understand that if things work out well, it works out very well. And when things don't work out, there's a very valid reason, and you have to have the patience and understanding to take a hard look at what you did wrong. Whether it is building a business, whether it's building a practice for you or marketing company for me or anything, crowdfunding is about a community, and that's what you're building. You're not just selling shit, you're building a community. And if you don't understand that, that's when every crowdfunding campaign, like when it's a cash grab, unless you're doing a product, that's when things go wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why yours didn't go wrong. Like you have a community, you have content that people wanted to see. And that's why like helping you was besides it being your friend, it was the easiest thing that I could do.
Well, thank you for that. So out of that, The Accords was born, and in the interim, a second book got written and picked up by a publisher. And during the pandemic, when I was stuck here by myself working half time because, not everybody was showing up via Zoom, right. I wrote the third book, which is still, the market's a little weird right now. So we haven't done anything with it. But that was like, again, that book that I wanted to read, to write all along. Like it's a street level guide to being your own spiritual guru, And so these events from 2016 to 2018 really forced me to be like, you know what? I can't rely on anything like that anymore. I can't necessarily rely on people, places, things. I got to do what makes me happiest. And that's when you would think I would have had that lesson by now. But listen, we're always learning, we're always growing, we're always evolving. And these events just, I'm at the point where like, I give such few fucks. Like, I swear to you, if I had time, I would do drag. I
would love to see that, by the way. I would go wherever you are in the country.
would love to do drag. I have my drag name. I want to do it.
Okay.
I don't have time.
Okay. Well, when you have time, Jen and I will be there.
Oh, of course. Oh, I know that. I'll do it in Atlantic City so we can meet halfway.
We will come all the way to New York or wherever you're going to go. It does not matter to me.
Well, when you hear that Chakra Khan is debuting somewhere.
As long as you do I Feel For You, then we're good.
Chakra Khan. I will do a mashup of I Feel For You with Let It Go. How's that?
I love it. I love it. I want to see it happen so bad. Okay, look, I feel like in you telling your story, you gave me names, and I just listening to you, I need to touch back on Marianne Williamson and Helen Louise, because they sound like amazing unintentional mentors for you in getting your book done. So let's go back to those. Like, because you just you were like, you know what, this person, and then she became an agent, and we're going to move right along. I'm like, no, there's something there. So how did they help?
Marianne Williamson. So I was first introduced to Marianne Williamson in 2004 when I was still involved in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous, a little bit before. And I'm kind of dating myself. This is when lectures came on cassette tapes. There was no Spotify. I mean, We still had Napster and all that shit. And so in 2004, I was with my technically second boyfriend ever, who was about 12 years my younger, looked like Ricky Martin, gorgeous man. I mean, but raging alcoholic.
Okay.
And through a series of events, that's when I relapsed with almost 8 years sober. And so as I was getting sober, I was introduced to Marianne Williamson in 2005. I got a cassette of on her lecture on relationships. And in that tape, she said, no relationship is ever a failure. I pressed pause on my cassette player and I was like, ooh, this bitch never dated this guy. Okay? So I said, listen, I spent $10.99 on this shit. Let me finish it.
By the way, my facial expression when you hit the pretend pause button was the exact same thing that you verbally said out loud. So we're on the same page. Let's go.
She said, as long as you learned a lesson in the former relationship that you could apply in a later relationship to make it better, the former relationship served its purpose. Those words never left me. Fast forward to 2012. Through, oh my gosh, here's another unintentional mentor. I was involved with this young guy, seems like a pattern, who was kind of using me. And so I was trying to hook up with his friend to make my guy jealous. And his friend was like, oh, no, come here. No, that's not going to happen. You look like you could use some help. His name is Jorge Hidalgo, who's out in California right now. And, he just like, what are you doing with this guy? I'm like, this is your buddy. He's like, exactly. What are you doing with this guy? And he posted on his Instagram a picture of him at Marianne Williamson book signing event. And I'm like, I remember this bitch. And so I picked up her book at that time that was released called The Law of Divine Compensation, something about money and miracles at work or something like that. And I read it with, not the eyes of 2004 Tony, but with that very hungry, I need to evolve kind of eyes. And I just like devoured all her stuff. And I got to meet her for the first time when she was running for governor of California. She was doing a fundraiser here in New York. And I just like fanboyed, as you've seen me fanboy many, many times.
I'm guilty of it. So Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what I love about Marianne Williamson is that she's this very spiritual, very famous person, but at the same time, the most humble person that you'll ever meet. She'll cut you. She has a way, I've seen her live in lectures. Basically, she's telling people, you're so full of shit, but in the nicest way. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to be like her. So like, she is so, what I love about her, she is so strong in her convictions and she lives it in such a way that's so authentic that, she just inspires me all the time. Even when she ran for president, she was being mocked on social media, left and right. And I'm like, you know what? If she makes it to the ballot, I'm going to vote for her. I don't care. That's what we need in the White House.
Yeah.
Helen Lewis. Oh, so I've always had a fondness for Brits, right? As our mutual love of Doctor Who.
Absolutely.
And so person I knew at the time was like, oh my God, Tony, I'm so excited for your first book. Can you give me some copies? I'll shop it around and I'll give it to my publicist, Helen, over in the UK. I was like, oh man, I don't know why someone in the UK would want this. I get an email and she's like, we need to talk. I'm like, okay. And so we set up a meeting. She had done all the research on me. She's like, mind you, the only thing I'd done right now is hashtag Is He Here Yet? The second book, the comic book, none of that had happened.
Right.
And she was like, Tony, you are such an important voice. We have the London Book Fair coming up soon. I would love for you let's schedule a week here. I'd love for you to do interviews, do a seminar at the London Book Fair, and I'm like, are you serious? Here I am, a self-published one-book author, and you want me to do all this? But, of course, what carries behind that is that I'm also an LGBT-specific psychologist in New York City.
Right. Right.
So I went to London for the very, very first time, and it was magical for me. And, Helen was like, from the get-go, you're not going to be a one-hit wonder, right? You've got another book in mind, right? I'm like, sure. At the London Book Fair, before my seminar, she's like, Tony, I got a quick interview with the London Book Fair people. Come with me. She sees this blonde lady she's talking to, American, I could tell by the accent, as I'm doing the interview. And you know me, I'm very loud, right? So this blonde lady hears me and she goes, I need to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Hi, I'm Tony Ortega, blah, blah, blah. She's like, I forget her name now. She's like, I work for HarperCollins. I'm like,
hello.
Hello. And she's like, let's talk. And Helen and I leave the room and we're like, these girls, we're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, and Helen, like, I'm transitioning from your publicist to your agent. You know that, right? I'm like, okay. Unfortunately, that deal with HarperCollins fell through because my social media was not very strong. And although they loved my content and they thought I had a very unique voice, and this is where, I owe so much to Helen. Like, I was devastated when I heard those news. She's like, Tony, you're not giving up. You're not giving up. And if we were to see a thread in all of these unintentional mentors, there's that thread of perseverance, of not giving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, that is like one of those things that, listen, I'll fall flat on my face and there's blood and dirt all over the place, but I don't stay there. I'll fuck up royally, but I won't stay there. And eventually, I don't know when, I will pick myself back up. And so, through Helen's hard work, we got a traditional book deal that led to an amazing book launch event hosted by a drag queen who made it to top 4 at RuPaul's Drag Race UK. And I highly doubt that I will ever be nominated for an Oscar, but that was my Oscar night. Like, no night could ever compare to speaking to a live audience in London with my co-host being Cheryl Hole, a contestant at RuPaul's Drag Race UK. And all because Helen said, "You are not giving up.
Right.
You are going to do this." And she continually provides that. I always tell her she's my biggest cheerleader.
That's amazing.
She believes in me sometimes more than I believe in myself.
And we need those people in our lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like the things that you said in the beginning about me, like, there's nothing that you haven't known about me before I started talking that hasn't inspired you. I was like, really? Like, you don't know that you have this impact on people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My friend Isolda, who is the episode just before this one airs, put me on blast. Um, she's like, yeah, I don't know why you're surprised. You're doing the same thing for a lot of people. Like, she's like, you did it for me. And I'm like, this is my big sister, like my adopted sister from another mister. I've known her for damn near 20 years, and dropped a bomb on me. She's like, yeah, you've inspired me through doing X, Y, and Z. And I like never heard her say those things before. So
Mm,
like there are times in that episode where I'm going to have to, it's probably this is being recorded after that, and this will air after that. So I'm leaving it in. You will hear me be speechless. Like, and cause I'm just kind of sitting back going like, I operate the same way you do. Like, I just kind of keep moving forward, which is my favorite Disney quote. And I don't think about it. And I don't think about the impact of the things that I do on other people. I
nope,
just want to keep going.
nope.
So,
Actually, that reminds me of a story of another unintentional mentor. Picture it, Miami, 1992. My very, very first job in the mental health field was at the Agape Women's Center. And my very first client was a young Black lady by the name of Gloria. So 1992. Gloria was a mother of 5, I believe, recovering crack addict, former sex worker, and also HIV positive. 1992, the treatments for HIV were not great.
right.
So I started around August, I want to say. And I just would look at Gloria and be like, how the fuck does she do this? She could die. Because she was also very medically compromised with other issues. I forget what they are because this is 30 years ago.
Right.
And she was, she got really sick and was moved to hospice. No, I'm sorry. Before that happened, I sat down. I go, Gloria, you inspire me. Your strength, your perseverance. And she goes, you know what, Tony? I've never finished anything in my life. Before I die, I'm going to graduate from this program sober.
That's amazing. Did she do it?
She was moved to hospice. We threw her a graduation ceremony.
Good.
All the works, balloons, diploma, crown.
Good.
She passed away a day and a half later.
I was going to say, if you did not graduate this woman, I was going to reach through the screen.
So she kept her word. She was
That's
not going to
amazing.
leave this earth until she graduated from that program sober.
That's amazing. Damn you. I'm starting to get teared up and wasn't ready for that. I so
You
let's
never know who's going to inspire you.
no, no. And we talked about this before the show. And uh this is a name I will probably say forever. But a friend of mine, John Hayden, passed in 2020 from a battle of cancer. Fought like a lion, was amazing. Like, I hope and pray if I ever get to face anything remotely similar or as challenging as he did, I have the grace, strength,
Mm.
and dignity to like even walk remotely in that man's footsteps.
I think
Um, yeah, because like he fought until he knew it was time to not fight, and then when he knew it was time to not fight, he made and I'm going to butcher paraphrasing this. He made his path to death the way he wanted it to be, and like I don't know a single moment in watching him go through that where I was not left forever changed by the person that was John Hayden.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're telling me about Gloria, like that's the person that's coming in the back of my mind. Not even a parallel story, but the only parallel is the perseverance.
Yep. And honestly, I think that's what inspires me the most. Like, you know, and it's so funny. And even in my dating history, the person I'm involved with right now, a recovering drug addict, 3 years sober, who is rebuilding his life now, going to school and all this stuff. You know, the people that inspire me have gone through some shit.
Right.
Because I want to hear how you got out of that shit and made yourself who you are today. Those are my mentors.
You want to hear how the phoenix rose from the ashes.
Exactly.
That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, is he here yet?
Mm-hmm.
How did we get to, are you here yet?
So are you here yet? So is he here yet was born out of this, 69-day relationship with a narcissist. Hoping that someone could read that and not have a 69-day relationship with a narcissist. That led to, my frustration with the self-help world and the spiritual community. Because, a lot of that creates this, for me, in my opinion, my experience being on, on both sides of it as a consumer and as a participant, I guess you could say, creates this dependency. And yeah. I don't even want my clients to be dependent on me. I want them to be dependent on themselves. So are you here yet? Hashtag are you here yet? How to STFU and show up for yourself was really born out of that frustration. And it's really out, drop all these social media influencers, drop all these gurus, this is how you get to do it and be it for yourself.
So who inspired you to get there? Because I'm looking at a list of, I have been keeping track, no less than 15 people who've up until is he here yet has gotten you to this point. And I have a fair feeling that Helen might have been the bridge between the two books.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because Helen wasn't involved in the development and production of the first book.
But is there a Helen contemporary mentor for you? Like, doesn't have to be in the publishing world. Is there somebody that said, I read the first book and this is what, like, the light bulb turned on for me?
Well, I mean, I got a lot of great feedback from people after they read the first book. People were very inspired and very moved by everything. The two books are very, very distinct in nature. They're very, very separate. I guess the second book was very mainstream, and I had just finished reading Mark Manson's. I read his second book first. Everything's Fucked: A Story About Hope.
Right.
That title gives me so much life, by the way. And I'm like, this guy speaks my language, because it's all about, listen, we could be all love and light all the time, but we also have to be like, there's a pile of shit right here that I need to look at and pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Mark Manson does. It's like, look, there's that pile of shit. What are you going to do about it? Right? Where the self-help community is like, well, you look at the pile of shit with love and you don't judge it. And no, bitch, pick up the shit.
Yeah. So his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, was recommended to me by my friend Vince, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
A good parallel for me to him is Gary John Bishop.
I'm not familiar with that name.
Gary John Bishop's, let me, and I'm pulling this up because he has got titles that would make you appreciate him as much as you appreciate Mark.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. Stop Doing That Shit is one title. Wise as Fuck is another one that I just finished on the drive that we had. He is, Unfuck Yourself was the first book.
Oh, I have
So
that one, and I started reading it, and I picked up. Okay, so I need to reread "Unfuck Yourself." Okay, I have it.
now I would recommend if like I downloaded I didn't read the book. I listened to the audiobook, and he's a Scottish man. So the accent just brings everything home. Uh, and coming from an Irish background of just very honest and blunt family members, hearing the Scot tell me the same things kind of that Mark talks about, but in a very like, that there's a way that we Americans use language that those in
Mhm,
Ireland and the UK use it a little bit differently.
mhm,
Like, I think that's where those two are just like equal sides of the justice scale for me.
mhm.
um I had a question and then you threw me Mark.
Absolutely.
What?
Mark, we're talking about Mark Manson, and everything's fucked, and
No. Yeah, we're good. It just you. This has been a very awesome conversation because I have just loved following the thread, and the thread, even with Mark and Gary John Bishop, is persistence, and picking yourself up. And you had brought your issues with the self help, and I have the same issues. That's kind of why like this podcast is not going to be when you have book number 3 to come out. We'll talk about book number 3 when you're on book number 4, because I want you to be able to sit in it for a little bit and not be like promoting.
right.
Like, there's a very different conversation when somebody's promoting versus when somebody's talking.
Yeah, this is true.
Um, and I respect all the people with podcasts who get the people on to promote the thing and get the clicks and the views and the thousands of listeners because,
Mhm.
did it. I just want to have some good conversations.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I see the faults of the self-help industry, because it is like, here's that pile of shit. Let's
Mhm.
talk about it. It's very pretty. And by the way, if you buy this 1999 class and this 295 book,
Yes.
we can keep talking about this thing that would really just take the simplest of conversation of pick that shit up and do something with it. Like,
Mhm.
that's the problem that I have.
Yep.
Um, so as you were talking about Mark and I brought up Gary Jump, I'm bringing like that kind of flooded my brain with a bunch of unintentional mentors of mine who do that for me, where I could just in the back of my mind be like, all right, pick that shit up, move it over there, do something with it, stop crying, move.
Mhm. And here's the issue, and I had this experience today in a session with a client. It was a first session. You know, I'm all about honoring your shit. I'm all about honoring your pain. But at some point, when are we going to move past that? And some folks like to stay in that pain. But you know what? I can't operate in the world like that.
Right.
Even yesterday, so I mentioned I'm been involved with someone for the last couple of months, and so it's got its share of complexities, this relationship.
Right.
And so I'm talking to my therapist, and he said, "Wait a minute," and I love this about him. He's a dick. He said, "Your fundamental worth is contingent upon an emoji from this guy."
I know, right? You're like, ah, damn it, you fucking got me.
See, but this is what the world needs.
Yep.
It's a bit of a well, maybe not so much of a gay analogy. When I forget which book I was talking to, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and I'm like, a lot of self-help books, is like having sex with lube. My books are like having sex with spit. And my friend said, good, because we've been lubed up way too much. We need some more sex with spit. And that's what I think, that's what gets you out of more ways than one. That's what gets you out of, being the victim, playing the victim,
Right.
sitting in the shit for too long. Sometimes
Yeah.
you just gotta go, and it's like, listen, when everything's stable, when everything is easy, not a lot of change happens there.
Right.
It's really literally when, let's go with the poop analogy, when the shit hits the fan, that's when change occurs.
Yeah. And look, shit has its purpose. It's a really great fertilizer, but it's when it's used properly, when it's, when it's applied properly. Um, I So the Marianne Williamson for you was a Dan Millman book for me called Way of the Peaceful Warrior. And
Okay.
one of the stories, and I believe it comes from that because I've read, it's been a decade since I read the book. I used to read that book religiously in my 20s. It's been 2 decades, but there's a parable that kind of stands out for me, and I've seen it told different ways from different people. Is there's these two monks, an older one and a younger one, who have both taken a vow of silence and chastity. And they're walking along the beach and they see this half naked woman drowning. And without question, the older monk turns and he just gets the woman and he brings her to the shore without saying a word, just make sure she's okay. And he keeps walking. And for the next 100 feet, the younger monk is just agitated and looking back over his shoulder and agitated and looking back over his shoulder. And finally, he breaks his silence and he says, "You have a vow of chastity and you have just put your hands all over this naked, half naked woman and you blah, 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 blah." And the older monk just stops and looks at him and says, "I left her back on the beach a while ago. Why are you still carrying her?"
I've heard that story, and it's an amazing story.
And to me, the self-help industry does not do enough of that, and
Yeah.
does enough of your worth is how many more times I can make you pay to sit in the shit.
Hmm.
So that's what I respect about you, and that's why I love you, and that's why uh, I was absolutely ecstatic when you said yes to coming on this podcast, because we all need a little bit more spit in our lives. we
Well, Rich, I'm not going to say no to you. And B, once I saw the format and what you were trying to do, it's like, of course I need to do this.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. So this is where I am going to let you go. But before I let you go, if anyone wants to learn how to reach out to the amazing Tony Ortega or find the Accords, where do they go and what do they do?
I'm pretty much across socials. I'm Dr. Tony Ortega, Dr. Tony Ortega, or on my website, drtonyortega.com. Again, just Dr. I think I did that more because A, it sounds pretentious if I spell out the word doctor, and B, it's like, no, I'm not Doctor Who. So, I just, so it's always Dr. Tony Ortega. And, mention that you heard me on here. Listen, I'm always willing to, help whenever I can, provide resources or guidance. I'm super busy. I will get back to you eventually. But yeah, it's like, listen, this is what I was put on this earth to do, and I'm so fortunate that I could do it.
So as I have wonderful friends who I consider family in the LGBT community, um, I'm going to ask you to do something that I'm only going to ask very few people in this to do. Give me one piece of advice for that person listening who is uncertain about being their best phoenix,
Mm.
to help them either reach out to somebody like yourself or have the courage to start rising out of the ashes.
Mm. You know, I have to go with what my first instinct tells me to say. I could sit here and try and get fancy.
I don't want fancy, I want honest.
What I tell people all the time, there's nothing inherently wrong with who you are. If there's things that you want to change because you want to make your life better, please do so. And there's a million resources to reach out to. But if you're wanting to change who you are, you don't need to change who you are, because who you are is inherently great. Unless you're Donald Trump.
I don't know a better place to end the podcast. Tony Ortega, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Welcome back, mentors. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Tony. It meant a lot to me as a comic book nerd to talk a little bit about Marvel. It meant a lot to me as his friend that he opened up and shared what he did. There's, as with always with Tony, there's very few things that are off limits, but I'm very, very proud and honored that he allowed me to share the entirety of this conversation with you. I hope you found some insight, some motivation, something of value in it. If not, you were entertained. And I really, as always, thank you and appreciate you for your time And I cannot wait to share and introduce you to next week's Unintentional Mentor.